So if you're looking to build a custom home, naturally one of the first questions you're going to want to have answered is how long is the home going to take to build? So I'm a custom home builder based in Gainesville, Florida. And in this video, I'm going to go over some of the custom homes I built for my clients over the last few years, how long they took to build, and then, what factors influence the construction timeline. And, keep in mind when I'm going over these houses, I'm strictly going over from the time we received the permit until the time we closed out the house with final inspection. So on all custom home builds, there's a process of, purchasing property, drawing plans, engineering, permitting, zoning approvals. And, every home is different based on the building department you're going through, the county that you're building in. So it's important to remember that there's a variable ahead of all these construction timelines, depending on where you're building, and then if there's any specific complications, with the building department that you're going through. So this first custom home I'm going to go over is a 2,900 square foot heated and cooled house, about 4,000 total. It's obviously a 2-story home, and this house took me about 10 and a half months to build. So it's 3 bed, 2.5 bath. There are some more complicated features on this home. So we did a stem wall foundation, which stem wall foundation takes longer than a monolithic slab foundation does. We did a standing seam metal roof on this house, which took some time. Looking at the interior of this home, we have some 20-foot ceilings, and we did bronze exterior, bronze interior, impact glass windows, which there is an extended lead time on those windows. We did Colby in this house. The kitchen cabinets were custom ordered, so there was an extended lead time on those as well. So, in general, 10 and a half months for this house, about 2,900 square feet, is definitely on the longer end. But when you factor in, the stem wall foundation covered with brick, and the brick porch, and, front and back porch were brick, the impact glass bronze Colby windows, standing seam metal roof, custom cabinets, tall ceilings, that's definitely on the upper end for a home of this size. But when you start adding in features that have longer lead times, it's somewhat typical. And so now here's a bigger house, around 3,800 square feet, heated and cooled, about 5,000 total. I built this home in the Jonesville area. And this house took about 9.5 months to build. But, in contrast to the last home, this house is on a monolithic slab, which takes about half the time of a stem wall. It has a shingle roof. We have, white exterior, white interior windows on this house. So, some of these extended lead times that we saw on the last farmhouse style home, on this one we don't have. So, for a, 3,800 square foot house, almost 4,000 heated and cooled, 9.5 months is pretty quick. So really, the size of the home obviously impacts how long it takes to build. But even within that, if you build a larger home that does not have, extended lead time, as many extended lead time materials going into the home, for a house that's 3,800 square feet heated and cooled, 9.5 months is on the quicker end. And so now this more modern custom home that I built in Alachua is around 2,300 square feet heated and cooled, and about 3,200 total. So this home took me about 10 months to build. And so, this home is on a monolithic slab, but on this particular property, it's on a creek. And so it's on a creek, and there was a clay issue at this property. So we did clay remediation, soil remediation to remove the clay. And then we also had to bring in about 100 loads of fill dirt because the home was built on a creek, so it was on a really steep slope. So, and we, required a lot of site work just to get started on this house. And so even though this is a more medium-sized home, with the extra site work, and then, going onto the inside of the home, we have these faux beams in the house, and we had special order hickory cabinets throughout the house. Some of these details on the inside of this home, did add to the longer time. So even though this house is only 2,300 square feet, and the previous home was 3,800 square feet, this house actually took a little bit longer to build. And so this home is about 4,000 square feet heated and cooled, and about 5,700 square feet total. And you can look at this home right away and tell there's some complicated features in this home. So, it's 2 stories. This whole main living area vaults from about 20 feet to 30 feet. So, all this interior work had to be done off scaffolding. So these exposed trusses were site-built timber frame trusses. All this hung groove had to be done off of scaffolding. The interior carpentry work took, a few months just in itself. The roof was standing seam. These sliding glass doors, and all the windows were special order. The cabinets were special order, Naughty Alder. The metal staircase and railings took over a month, and they're all built on site. So for a larger home like this, about 12 months when it's more complicated is very typical. So this was about a 1,600 square foot heated and cooled home that I built on Main Street in High Springs. And with this home, we were going for, not your typical 1,600 square foot finish. I mean, that's on the smaller end of homes I build. But this home, we wanted to fit into downtown High Springs, with the other, historic homes in the area. So while it was a small home, we did have a lot of special order materials. So the windows were aluminum wood clad, so those took longer to come in. The brickwork on this home, there's a specific brick we wanted from Cherokee Brick that had an extended lead time on it. There were a lot of little details like that in this home that took longer, but in total, this house took me about 6.5 months to build from permitting to CO. And so this home is about 2,500 square feet heated and cooled, about 4,000 total. It's a 4-bed, 3-bath in Glorious Way subdivision in Southwest Gainesville. And this home only took me about 7.5 months to build. So this is kind of like your typical Southwest Gainesville subdivision home. So it was on a corner, looking through the home, hardy, monolithic slab, hardy board siding, shingle roofing, obviously nice cabinetry. We had an electric fireplace with built-ins, and we had a pool. Being also on a corner, we had, more sidewalking to put in, quite a bit of landscaping to be put into this home. So we made pretty good timing at 7.5 months, but this is probably for a home this size, probably a best case scenario, about 7.5 months. Everything went really smooth. Everything went perfectly. There was no, extended delays on materials coming in. So for a 2,500 square foot home, 4,000 total, this style, 7.5 months is about, as quick as you could expect. And so this is another, more modern style latchwood custom home. So this home's around 2,600 square feet heated and cooled, around 3,300 square feet total. On the outside, we have a hardy panel reveal siding. We have standing seam metal roof, architectural awnings, black Colby Forgent, Colby Vistalux, windows and doors, which have extended lead times. And going to the interior of this house, we have a mix of wood flooring and terrazzo tile flooring. On this home, we use Straw Woodworks out of Gainesville for, custom cabinets throughout. And they have, pretty typically like a 6-month lead time on cabinets. So, the cabinets took, a pretty long time, pretty far time out. That impacted the timeline. A lot of the details inside the home were higher end as well, like the staircase and the tiled showers. So this one took about 9.5 months total to build from start to finish. And so, hopefully this video and going over a handful of the houses that I've built over the last few years gives you a good idea on what to expect when you're building your custom home. Obviously the houses we went over, range anywhere from about 6.5 months to 12 months of construction time. And, again, there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of, the same home, 1 year may take 8 months and then the next year may take 9 months because of material delays. But hopefully going through all these houses and seeing the different timelines gives you a good idea of what to expect for your custom home that you're looking to build.